My name is Marjorie Layton, and I turned 64 last spring, old enough to know that even love can hide a sharp edge. That morning, sunlight slanted through my Charleston kitchen window, catching on the dust motes and the rim of my teacup. I was trimming roses for the breakfast table when the doorbell rang. At the door stood a courier in a navy cap, holding a gleaming golden envelope. My name was written across it in my daughter's handwriting, curved and deliberate, the same way she used to label her school notebooks when she was 10. I thanked him, closed the door, and turned the envelope over in my hands. The paper felt too fine for everyday mail, too extravagant for something as simple as love. I slid it open carefully with the edge of a butter knife. Inside lay 2 glossy tickets and a brochure that sparkled with turquoise water and white sails. A Caribbean cruise, first class. A small card was tucked between the pages. To Mom, because you never do anything for yourself. Enjoy the Caribbean. Love, Claire. My fingers trembled. Claire had always been thoughtful, but never spontaneous. She planned everything: her wedding, her career, even her apologies. This kind of gift didn't come from impulse. Before I could think further, the phone rang. Her name flashed across the screen. "Did you get it?" she asked before I could even say hello. "I did," I said, still staring at the tickets. "You shouldn't have, sweetheart. It must have cost a fortune." "Oh, Mom," she laughed lightly. "You've worked your whole life for everyone else. It's time you took a real break." Sun-sea silence. "Just you. Just me," I repeated, careful to sound amused, not uneasy. "Of course. You deserve peace for once. Don't worry about a thing, everything's arranged. You leave Saturday from Fort Lauderdale." Her words tumbled out, fast, smooth. I heard faint murmurs in the background, her husband maybe, or the TV, but then she lowered her voice. "Promise me you'll go," she said softly. "You need this, Mom." I promised. What else could I do? After the call ended, I sat at the kitchen table, the envelope glowing in the morning light. The roses I'd been trimming lay forgotten on the counter, their petals beginning to curl at the edges. For a moment, I imagined the ocean breeze on my face, the sound of gulls. But another image came instead. Claire's smile at Christmas, too bright, too polished. The kind of smile you wear when you're keeping something behind your teeth. I placed the tickets beside my cup and noticed how the golden paper shimmered like a warning. It was a beautiful gift. But as I looked at it, a quiet unease settled deep in my chest, soft but certain, like the tide rising beneath calm water. 2 days later, Charleston woke beneath a veil of light rain. The air smelled faintly of salt and jasmine, and the oak trees outside my porch were heavy with moss. I had packed neatly 2 linen dresses, a sun hat, my husband's old camera. Everything sat in one small suitcase by the door waiting for the taxi that would take me to the airport. At 8:70, I realized I had forgotten something. My blood pressure medication. The thought came to me like a flash of cold water. I almost ignored it, almost decided to buy a replacement later. But habit and years of caution pushed me to turn back. The streets were quiet, slick with rain when I pulled into my driveway. Claire's car was parked by the curb. That wasn't unusual. She had a spare key and sometimes stopped by to water the plants or grab the mail. Still something about seeing her car, their engine still warm, made the air feel heavier. I stepped out, umbrella in hand, and walked to the porch. The house was dim inside. Only a sliver of light spilled from the living room window. I reached for the doorknob, but froze when I heard her voice, soft, familiar, unmistakable. "Don't worry." Claire said, her tone low and even. "It's a one-way ticket. Once she's on board, it'll look like an accident." For a heartbeat, I thought I had misheard. My hand trembled on the doorknob. She was silent for a few seconds before continuing, her voice clipped and practical, the same tone she used when managing her office team. "I told you she won't suspect a thing. The life insurance is active and the house is in my name once she's gone. It's perfect." The sound of ice clinking in a glass. A man's voice answered her husband, Owen, calm but nervous. "Claire, this is crazy. What if someone—" "No one will find anything she cut in. People fall overboard all the time. She's old, frail. It'll look natural." I stood motionless, the rain whispering against the porch roof. A slow, hollow ache spread through me. Then something colder. Clarity. My only daughter, the child I had raised through scraped knees and sleepless nights, was planning my death. My breath came shallow. Every sound in the house became sharp. The hum of the refrigerator, the soft rhythm of her voice. I stepped back quietly, careful not to let the boards creak. The wind caught the edge of my umbrella, flapping it open with a snap. I froze again, but no one came to the window. I wanted to scream, to burst through the door and demand why. But the part of me that had weathered widowhood debt and loneliness, the part that had learned to endure in silence, took control. If I confronted her now, she would lie. If I stayed, I might die. I slipped down the steps, rain soaking my shoulders, and walked to the car. My reflection in the window looked unfamiliar, pale, hollow-eyed, but strangely steady. I started the engine and drove not toward the airport, but toward the long bridge out of town. My heart pounded in rhythm with the windshield wipers. Every image of Claire that came to me, her first piano recital, her graduation gown, her wedding shattered and rearranged itself into something unrecognizable. Somewhere along the line, the little girl who used to press her cheek against my arm had learned to calculate, to lie, to erase me from her future. At the first red light, I pulled over and shut my eyes. The betrayal felt physical, like a hand tightening around my throat. I thought of her words again. One-way ticket. It'll look like an accident. If she had already planned it this carefully, then it wasn't just greed, it was desperation. Something had pushed her to believe my death was worth more than my life. The rain eased to a drizzle. I found myself driving toward the pier where my husband and I used to walk in the evenings. The benches were slick, the water gray and restless. I sat there for a long time, hands gripping the damp wood, until the trembling stopped. When I finally stood, the fear had turned into something sharper. I had no tears left, only a cold, focused calm. I drove home an hour later, waited until Claire's car was gone, and went inside. The air smelled faintly of her perfume, clean and citrusy. On the counter, she had left a small note. "Don't forget your pills, Mom. Love you." I stared at the handwriting, the looping L in. Love the neat precision of it. I folded the note, slipped it into my pocket, and walked through the house, touching the back of each chair, the edge of the doorway, the framed photo of her at 12, with braces and rain-soaked hair. The woman who once trusted everyone was gone. That night, I packed again, this time with a different purpose. The clothes and shoes went into the suitcase, but along with them, I added a small notebook, a pen, and my husband's old digital recorder. If my daughter wanted me gone, she would discover what kind of woman she had underestimated. By morning, the rain had stopped, leaving the city washed clean. The taxi pulled up on time. As I stepped outside, I locked the door behind me and whispered, "We'll do it your way, Claire." And for the first time in my life, I meant it. That night, the house felt like it belonged to someone else. The walls seemed to breathe with old memories, and every creak of the floor carried the echo of my husband's footsteps. I sat by the window for hours watching the faint shimmer of rain under the streetlight until exhaustion finally pushed me to stand. In the bathroom mirror, the reflection that stared back wasn't the same woman who had packed for a vacation that morning. My hair, still damp from the rain, framed a face I barely recognized. Pale, drawn, but strangely calm. Beneath the fear, something steadier had begun to rise. "All right, sweetheart," I whispered, my breath fogging the mirror. "We'll do it your way, but I'll write the ending." For a long time, I just stood there, holding my own gaze, feeling a pulse of determination replace the panic. I had spent my whole life making sacrifices for others, my husband, my students, my daughter. Maybe this was what happened when you gave too much of yourself. Someone eventually mistook your love for weakness. Not anymore. I walked to the study and pulled open the drawer where I kept my old address book. Most of the names inside belonged to people long gone or moved away, but one stood out: Frank Odell. I hadn't spoken to him in almost a decade. He'd been my late husband's fishing companion, and before retirement, a detective for the Charleston Police Department. The kind of man who'd seen too much to be surprised by anything. I hesitated before dialing. It was past 10, and I half hoped he wouldn't answer. But after 3 rings, a gravelly voice broke through. "Marjorie, well, I'll be damned. It's been years." "Hello, Frank." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "I need your help with something delicate." A pause. Then the shift in his tone, the instinct of a man who could read trouble through silence. "What kind of delicate are we talking about?" "I can't explain everything over the phone," I said. "But it's about Claire." Another pause. "Your daughter. She all right?" "She's fine." I lied. "I just need you to look into something for me. Quietly. Financial records insurance, anything recent. I'll pay for your time." "Forget the money," he said. "You sound like you're in real trouble. You sure you're safe tonight?" I glanced at the locked door. The lights dimmed, the stillness pressing against the windows. "For now," I said. "Just don't tell anyone I called." "All right," he replied. "I'll start tomorrow. You take care, Marjorie. And if you need to disappear for a while, you call me first." When the line went dead, I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faint patter of rain. I should have felt terrified, but what I felt instead was control. For the first time since hearing Claire's voice behind that door, I wasn't a victim waiting for fate. I was the one setting the terms. Before going to bed, I opened my suitcase one more time and slipped Frank's number into the side pocket next to my passport. Then I looked around the room, the framed wedding photo, the soft hum of the old ceiling fan, the rose-patterned curtains Claire had picked years ago. Everything looked ordinary, untouched. But the woman who lived here wasn't the same. By the time dawn crept through the blinds, the fear had hardened into something unbreakable. Whatever waited for me on that ship, I would be ready for it. By the time the taxi reached Fort Lauderdale, the morning sun had already burned through the thin veil of coastal fog. The air shimmered with heat and the scent of salt. Port Everglades stretched wide and gleaming before me. Rows of ships lined the harbor like gleaming towers, each one humming with life and laughter. The ocean's serenity stood among them, the largest and most immaculate, its white hull reflecting the light like polished glass. From the distance it looked peaceful, luxurious, harmless, the perfect disguise. Families bustled along the pier, suitcases rolling over the asphalt, children running ahead in excitement. I walked among them, my pace unhurried, my smile polite. My fingers gripped the handle of my small navy suitcase as I moved toward the gangway, watching memorizing. A woman beside me laughed, snapping photos of her husband with a drink already in hand. Two young crew members waved greeting passengers with practiced warmth. Their uniforms were crisp, their smiles bright. It all felt like theater, every gesture rehearsed, every welcome line delivered with precision. When it was my turn to hand over my passport, the attendant, a young man with a sunburned nose, beamed at me. "Welcome aboard, Mrs. Layton. First time cruising with us." "Yes," I said, steadying my voice. "My daughter arranged everything." "How thoughtful," he said, stamping my boarding pass. "She must love you very much. If only he knew." I thanked him softly and stepped onto the long metal ramp. The scent of oil and seawater mingled in the air as the ocean opened before me. My pulse quickened, not from excitement, but calculation. I took in the structure as I climbed lifeboats suspended in neat orange rows, security cameras tucked discreetly under the railings, deck numbers painted near the entrances. Every detail mattered now. Inside, the ship gleamed with gold trim and polished marble. A pianist played in the atrium beneath a chandelier that swayed gently with the tide. Passengers clustered around the reception desk, collecting key cards and drinks. I smiled when others smiled, nodded when greeted, and kept moving. My cabin was on deck 8, midship, ocean-facing. The door opened with a soft click to reveal a spacious room, a bed dressed in white linens, a balcony overlooking the water, and a fruit basket arranged neatly on the table. A handwritten note lay beside it. "Have a wonderful voyage, Mrs. Layton." Guest services. I set my suitcase down and walked to the balcony. The sea stretched endless and blue beneath the sun, rippling with light. Somewhere below, luggage clattered and horns blared, but above it all, the sound of the ocean carried like breath. It was beautiful, yes, but beauty often came with teeth. I leaned on the railing, letting the wind brush my face, and began to map the ship in my mind. From my balcony, I could see 2 stairways leading down toward the lifeboats. One security camera angled toward the outer deck, another covered the pool entrance. My reflection in the glass door looked calm, composed. No one watching would guess how fast my heart was beating. When the departure horn sounded, the crowd on deck erupted in cheers. Confetti drifted into the air, bright against the water. I watched families wave at the shore lovers taking photos, strangers hugging goodbye. I raised my hand, too, an old habit more than a gesture of joy. Somewhere back in Charleston, my daughter was probably sitting at her kitchen table, smiling to herself, imagining her plan already set in motion. The ship began to move slow and deliberate. The port slid away, the horizon widening until land was only a fading line. I stood on the balcony as the last trace of the coast disappeared, my hand resting on the rail. Beneath my calm expression, every sense stayed alert, every sound, every shadow, every angle of the deck memorized. Let her think she'd won. Let her believe I was gone. The sea had always been my husband's love, not mine. But as the waves deepened to blue, I felt something unexpected stir inside me. Not peace, not fear, but resolve. The ocean stretched before me like a blank page. Whatever story Claire had planned, I would be the one to finish it. The first night aboard the Ocean Serenity unfolded like a carefully arranged illusion. Every surface gleamed crystal chandeliers, marble floors, the silverware catching the golden light of the dining hall. A small orchestra played near the bar, their violins rising and falling over the soft murmur of conversation. I had dressed simply, a navy blue dress I'd worn to a school reunion years ago. Around me, women shimmered in sequins, their laughter light as the bubbles in their champagne. I moved through them like a ghost, smiling politely, choosing a small table near the edge of the room where I could see everything without being seen. A waiter poured water into my glass and asked, "Will anyone be joining you, ma'am?" "No," I said softly. "Just me." He nodded, polite but curious, and moved on. I looked around the room, pretending to study the menu while my eyes traced every entrance, every possible exit. The air smelled of roasted salmon and vanilla candles. Somewhere behind the music, I could hear the faint hum of the ship's engines, steady, endless, like a second heartbeat. When I lifted my glass of wine, I noticed her. She sat at the next table alone, wearing a red silk dress that caught the light each time she moved. Silver hair swept back neatly, skin glowing from sun and salt air. She held herself with quiet poise, like someone who had learned to endure and still stand tall. Our eyes met by accident. She smiled first. "Beautiful night, isn't it?" she said. Her voice carried a warmth that disarmed me instantly. "Yes," I replied, "almost too beautiful to be real." She laughed softly, and the sound was honest, unguarded. That's what I thought too. Everything feels so perfect here, it makes you wonder what it's hiding. I liked her immediately. She introduced herself as Evelyn Hart, 62, from Savannah. A widow, she said, who had learned to live again after losing almost everything. She didn't explain at first, but I caught the careful pause between her words, the kind that comes from an old wound that still aches. As dinner was served, our conversation flowed with an ease that surprised me. She had a sharp wit, a dry humor, and the calm intelligence of someone who had weathered storms and learned to read people before they spoke. When dessert arrived, she looked at me thoughtfully. "Forgive me for saying this, Marjorie, but you seem uneasy. You smile when people talk to you, but your eyes, they never rest." I hesitated. "I suppose I'm not used to traveling alone." "Maybe," she said gently, "but I've seen that look before. It's not loneliness. It's vigilance." Her words pierced me more deeply than she could have known. I tried to laugh it off, but she didn't press. Instead, she raised her glass. "To the women who keep their eyes open," she said. I touched my glass to hers. "And to the women who notice." We drank, and something shifted between us, an understanding that didn't need explanation. After dinner, we walked together along the promenade deck. The sea was black and endless, the stars scattered like glass. Evelyn wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. "My son," she said quietly. "Once emptied my savings account while I was in the hospital. Signed my name on the papers and disappeared for 2 years. I forgave him, but I never forgot. I didn't speak." The wind carried the faint scent of salt, and I realized that for the first time since leaving Charleston, I didn't feel completely alone. Evelyn glanced at me, her expression calm but knowing. "You don't have to tell me your story, Marjorie. Not yet. Just know that I can tell when someone's been hurt by family. We recognize each other." I looked out over the water, the reflection of the ship's lights trembling on the waves. The sound of laughter from the ballroom drifted through the open doors, distant, harmless, belonging to another world. "Maybe we do," I said softly. She smiled again. "Then let's keep each other company at least for this voyage." We shook hands lightly, as if sealing a quiet pact. When I returned to my cabin later that night, the air inside felt less suffocating. I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the balcony watching the dark horizon. Somewhere beyond it, danger waited, but so did the unexpected comfort of an ally. The ocean whispered below, steady and infinite, as if reminding me that not every stranger was a threat. Some appeared when you needed them most, and stayed just long enough to change the ending. The ship rocked gently under a warm Caribbean breeze. After dinner, Evelyn and I had found a quiet corner of the upper deck, away from the noise of the piano bar. The night was soft and perfumed with salt. She was telling me about her garden in Savannah when my phone began to buzz inside my bag. The screen lit up with a name that made my pulse quicken. Claire. For a moment, I only stared at it. The last time I'd heard her voice, it had promised my death. Now, miles away in the middle of the sea, that same voice wanted to check on me. Evelyn glanced over. You going to answer? I nodded, slowly, forcing a smile that didn't feel real. I should. She worries. Evelyn leaned closer, lowering her voice. Just remember, people who plot don't call to check in. They call to confirm. I pressed accept. Hi, sweetheart. My tone came out light, warm, perfectly ordinary. How are you? Mom Claire's voice was sugary, almost rehearsed. I was just thinking about you. Are you meeting new people? Enjoying the cruise? I met Evelyn's eyes. She mouthed silently. She's checking on you. Oh, yes, I said, as if the lie came naturally. Everyone's so kind here. The sea air is wonderful. You were right. I really did need this. That makes me so happy. Her relief sounded exaggerated. Every syllable stretched too wide. You're not overdoing it, are you? No wandering around the deck alone at night? I looked out at the dark water, the reflection of the ship's lights rippling like a broken mirror. No, of course not. I'm being careful. You raised me better than that. That made her laugh, a sharp, brittle sound that told me she was pacing somewhere. I could almost see her in her kitchen, twisting her hair around her finger, pretending to care. Good, she said. I just want you to relax. You always worry too much. I slipped the phone slightly away from my ear and pressed record on my husband's old digital device hidden beneath the tablecloth. I'm trying, dear, I said softly. You know me, always a little anxious about new places, but I'm grateful. It's beautiful here. I wish you could see it. Oh, maybe next time, Claire replied. But for now, focus on resting. You'll thank me later. The phrase chilled me. You'll thank me later. Her voice carried that same glint of control, as if she were rehearsing the last scene of a play, only she knew the ending too. I closed my eyes and steadied my breath. Well, I said you've done so much for me already. I don't deserve it. Don't be silly, she said quickly. You deserve everything. We spoke for another few minutes, small talk, empty warmth. She asked what I was eating, if the beds were comfortable, if I'd met anyone nice. I gave her all the answers she wanted to hear. When the call ended, the phone screen dimmed to black. I held it for a long time before setting it down. Evelyn, quiet beside me, finally spoke. You're good, she said. Too good. If she's trying to read you, she won't find a crack. I've had practice, I murmured. Still, Evelyn said, watching the horizon, don't get too confident. People like her, they always call again before they strike. The wind picked up, brushing through our hair. Far below, the waves hissed softly against the hull. I slipped the recorder into my pocket, feeling its small, solid weight like an anchor against my heartbeat. Acting, I realized, was no longer just caution. It was survival. And somewhere on the other end of that phone, my daughter still believed I was the fool she had built me to be. The morning sunlight streamed through my cabin curtains, bright and merciless. The Ocean Serenity had docked briefly at Nassau, and most passengers had gone ashore for shopping and sightseeing. I stayed behind, sitting at the small desk by the window, staring at the folder Claire had mailed with my travel papers. Everything seemed perfect. Flight details, hotel information for the night before departure, even the ship's itinerary printed in color. But something felt off. I flipped through each page again, slower this time. My outbound flight was listed clearly. Charleston to Fort Lauderdale. Below it, in neat black print, the return section read only one word: pending. My stomach tightened. I took a deep breath and gathered the documents, slipping them into my handbag. Then I made my way down to the passenger services desk on Deck 4. The lobby was quiet, except for a few staff members arranging brochures. Behind the counter, a young clerk with dark hair and a pressed uniform greeted me with a practiced smile. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you today? I'd like to confirm my travel arrangements," I said evenly, placing the folder on the counter. "My daughter booked this trip for me. I just want to check the details of my return flight to Charleston." He typed quickly, his eyes moving from the screen to the papers and back again. The cheerful rhythm of his keystrokes slowed. "That's strange," he murmured. "It looks like we have your one-way reservation from Fort Lauderdale to the ship, but there's no return flight attached. None at all." He shook his head. "No, ma'am. Usually round-trip packages are booked together. It's possible the return ticket hasn't been confirmed yet." A familiar chill spread across my shoulders. I smiled politely, keeping my voice steady. Could I book a return flight myself? Just to be safe? "Of course," he said, quickly, relieved to be helpful again. "We can process that right here." I handed him my credit card and watched as he entered the details. My fingers rested lightly on the counter, but inside I could feel my pulse beating hard against my wrist. When he printed the new ticket, I asked him to make 2 copies. He gave me a sympathetic look. Travel agents mix things up all the time. I'm sure it's just an oversight. I thanked him, folded the receipt carefully, and slipped one copy into my wallet, the other into the lining of my suitcase. As I walked back toward the elevator, the hallway felt colder, narrower. Each polished surface reflected my face like a stranger's. Every part of me knew this wasn't a mistake. Claire hadn't forgotten anything. Back in my cabin, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the folded papers in my lap. The noise of laughter echoed faintly through the walls. Families returning from shore, excited, carefree. Their joy felt distant, like a language I no longer understood. Around sunset, my phone buzzed. A message from Claire. "Don't worry, Mom. Everything's handled." I read it twice, then again. The words were simple, but they carried the same polished certainty that had once comforted me that now felt like poison. Handled. That word had weight control finality. I typed a reply, but didn't send it. My thumbs hovered over the keys, then stopped. She didn't need to know that I had already fixed her oversight, that I had already stepped out of the role she had written for me. I set the phone face down on the table and stood walking to the balcony. The sea stretched out endless and blue, beautiful and empty. Below, the waves hit the ship's hull with a low, rhythmic thud, steady like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. For a long time, I watched the horizon darken. The wind tugged at the loose strand of my hair, and I thought of the little girl who used to run barefoot across our backyard, holding my hand, laughing at everything. Now that same girl had left me stranded in the middle of an ocean. But she had forgotten one thing: her mother still knew how to swim. I folded the papers once more, slipped them into my purse, and locked the door behind me. Somewhere deep in the ship's steady hum, my fear finally quieted. What replaced it was something colder and sharper: the instinct to survive. The next afternoon, the sun burned high over the Caribbean, the kind of light that bleached everything into calm and comfort. Passengers lounged across the upper deck reading, laughing, sipping cocktails served in frosted glasses. The pool shimmered in the center like a mirror of sky. Evelyn and I found a pair of shaded lounge chairs near the railing. She wore a wide-brimmed straw hat and carried a paperback mystery she never actually opened. I had learned by now that Evelyn preferred to watch people, their gestures, their eyes, the way they revealed themselves when they thought no one noticed. We were quiet for a long time, listening to the distant sound of steel drums from the entertainment deck. Then she leaned toward me and said softly, "Don't turn your head yet, but there's a man in a green shirt sitting by the pool bar. He's been looking this way for half an hour." I froze mid-breath. My hands resting on my lap tightened around the edge of my towel. "Looking at us, at you," she said. "Specifically you." I forced a small laugh, trying to sound careless. "Maybe he's just bored." Evelyn's tone didn't change. "Maybe. But bored men don't keep their drinks full for that long. That one hasn't taken a sip." Her words settled like a stone in my chest. I reached for my sunglasses, adjusting them just enough to glance across the deck. The man sat alone, a plain green shirt, khaki shorts, dark sunglasses, a small drink sweating beside him. His posture was relaxed, but his attention didn't waver. Every few seconds, his gaze returned to me, deliberate, patient. I looked away quickly. "You're sure I've been watching him for an hour," she said. "He's not part of the staff, not security either. His badge says guest, but he doesn't look like one." The air around me thickened, the laughter and music blurring into white noise. For the first time since I'd boarded the ship, I felt something crawling up the back of my neck, a cold, invisible awareness. Evelyn reached over, touched my wrist gently. "Let's test him. I'll leave first. You stay right here. If he's just a man with a wandering eye, he'll find someone else to stare at." Before I could protest, she stood smoothing her dress and walking toward the buffet line, her steps light, unhurried. I stayed still, pretending to read the magazine on my lap. Minutes passed. The man didn't move. He didn't follow Evelyn's figure or glance at the others walking by. His head remained slightly turned toward me. I felt his stare even through the sunglasses. I folded the magazine, rose slowly, and walked toward the pool edge, pretending to look at the water. My reflection shimmered beside his in the glass of the bar counter. He shifted only slightly enough to keep me in his periphery. When I returned to my chair, Evelyn was waiting, holding 2 glasses of lemonade. "Well?" she asked quietly. He never looked away, I whispered. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Then it's time to be careful, Marjorie. Someone's watching, and not just out of curiosity." I nodded, though the motion felt distant, automatic. Somewhere deep inside, I had known this was coming. Claire's reach had found me even here, surrounded by ocean and strangers. As the ship continued cutting through the endless blue, I stared at the man in the green shirt one last time. He raised his glass slowly, as if in greeting, before turning back to the horizon. It was almost polite. Almost. That evening, the ship's casino pulsed with the kind of artificial joy that always made me uneasy. Bright lights, laughter too loud, and the clinking of glasses over the hum of slot machines. Evelyn and I sat at the far end of the bar, close enough to watch the man in the green shirt, but far enough to look casual. She stirred her drink without tasting it. "If we wait for him to make the first move, we'll never get proof," she murmured. "So we make the move for him." I understood what she meant, though. My stomach tightened. "And if he's dangerous?" Her eyes flicked toward the bar mirror, watching his reflection. "Then we'll finally know." The bartender passed by, offering another round. Evelyn waved him off, but I lifted my glass. One more? I said, smiling, as though the world were still harmless. The liquor burned down my throat, loosening something inside me, not courage exactly, but control. I needed him to believe I was weak. After 2 more sips, I leaned against the counter, letting my shoulders slump slightly. Evelyn glanced at me, and I gave the faintest nod. The act had begun. The man appeared minutes later, his green shirt crisp, his smile polite. He carried a glass of tonic and lime, no alcohol, I noticed. Evening, he said, voice smooth, practiced. You look like you've had a long day. I laughed softly, the sound half slurred. Guess I'm not used to all this luxury. My daughter insisted I come, said it would help me relax. He smiled, his eyes studying my face, weighing every word. That's sweet of her. Traveling alone, then? Yes, I said, pretending to wobble slightly on the bar stool. She wanted me to have a change of scenery. He caught my arm lightly, as if steadying me. Careful there. These stools aren't as stable as they look. Thank you, I said, smiling up at him. You're very kind, Mr. Tom, he answered too quickly. Just Tom. I nodded, pretending to forget the name as soon as I heard it. Well, thank you, Tom. You're a gentleman. He leaned a little closer. What cabin are you in? Mrs. Oh, goodness, I said, letting out a tipsy laugh. Don't make me think too hard. Ate something. I keep forgetting the one with the balcony, facing the water. I told them I wanted to fall asleep to the sound of waves. Evelyn, sitting 2 seats away, raised her glass to hide the phone recording in her hand. Deck 8, maybe, he asked lightly. Ah, yes, that's it. I smiled, as if confirming an innocent detail. My daughter said I'd love it there. He grinned again, but his eyes flicked toward the clock on the far wall. You should get some rest soon. Don't want to overdo it. I might, I said. After one more drink. He tipped his glass in farewell and left with an easy gait, as though nothing in the world pressed on him. I waited until he was gone before straightening up. Evelyn turned the phone screen toward me, her hands trembling slightly. Got him. Every word. We paid our bill and followed at a distance as he disappeared into the hallway near the communications room. The ship had old-style public phones mounted for passengers, mostly unused now. From around the corner, we could hear his voice, low controlled, but clear enough, through the recorder's mic. Deck 8 balcony, he said. Perfect. She's alone. Late tonight will work. My hand went cold around the edge of the wall. Evelyn's eyes met mine, hard and steady. We waited until he hung up and walked away, blending back into the crowd. Only when the corridor was empty did we breathe again. Back in my cabin, I sat on the edge of the bed, shaking despite the heat. Evelyn locked the door behind us. The lights from the balcony spilled across the carpet, soft and deceptive. He's not acting alone, she said quietly. No man plans this by himself. Someone gave him your details. I nodded, my throat dry. Claire. The name tasted bitter. Evelyn placed the phone on the table, saving the audio file under a new name. This is enough to alert the captain, she said. But we can't move too fast. If he suspects, he might vanish. I looked at the folded papers on the nightstand, my forged travel documents, the fake return flight Claire had arranged. Every thread was tightening into a single knot. Outside, the wind picked up. Waves slapped against the hull, rhythmic and unrelenting. I imagined the man in green somewhere below deck, waiting, rehearsing, confident that his target was already halfway to becoming a memory. I rose, walked to the mirror, and stared at my reflection. The faint makeup smudged the outline of fear in my eyes. Yet beneath it, something else flickered. I'm not the woman they think I am, I said quietly. Evelyn stood behind me, her voice steady. No, you're not. We sat together through most of the night, listening to the sounds of the ship, the faint laughter from distant cabins, the ocean whispering against steel. Each hour passed like a test of endurance. Sleep was impossible. Every creak, every gust of wind sounded like footsteps outside the door. By dawn, I knew one truth beyond doubt: the hunter was real. And he was patient. The following morning, Evelyn and I stood outside the captain's office, the hum of the ship's engines vibrating faintly beneath our feet. The air was thick with salt and anticipation. I clutched the phone that held the recording, my palm damp despite the cool air conditioning that seeped from the hallway vents. A tall officer passed by, nodding politely, before opening the door. "Captain Hayes will see you now." Inside the office was elegant but practical mahogany desk maps, framed along the walls, a brass compass gleaming on the shelf. Captain Julian Hayes rose from behind the desk, his expression calm but watchful. He was in his early 50s, with the kind of quiet authority that came from long years at sea. "Mrs. Layton, Mrs. Hart," he said, motioning for us to sit. "My crew mentioned you had something urgent to report." Evelyn gave me a quick glance before sliding her phone across the desk. "We do. You'll want to hear this." The captain pressed play. The audio filled the small room, the man's voice low and steady. "Deck 8 balcony. Perfect. She's alone. Late tonight will work." Captain Hayes leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly. He let the silence settle after the recording ended, then folded his hands. "That was taken on this ship." "Yes," I said. "Last night near the casino bar. I believe that man is following me." "Do you know who he is?" "I don't," I replied. "But I believe someone sent him. My daughter arranged this trip, and there have been threats before." Evelyn handed him the photos she'd taken on her phone, the man at the bar, the same man near the pool. "He's been watching her for days," she added, "and he's not acting like a tourist." The captain studied the pictures, his jaw tightening slightly. "All right," he said, finally. "We take these matters seriously." He pressed a button on his intercom. "Send in Officer Patel and Officer Lin." Two uniformed crew members entered, both composed and alert. The captain's voice shifted into quiet command. "These ladies are to be assisted discreetly. No attention drawn. I want a plainclothes presence on Deck 8 and surveillance coverage near Cabin 812? "Yes, sir," the taller officer replied. Captain Hayes turned back to us. "Mrs. Layton, we'll install hidden cameras near your cabin and the adjoining hallway. If anyone approaches your door without authorization, we'll know. In the meantime, I'm assigning you this." He opened a drawer and placed a small velvet box on the desk. Inside lay a delicate silver pendant, shaped like a teardrop. "It looks like jewelry," he said, "but if you press the underside, it sends a signal directly to security. Someone will be there within 30 seconds. I traced the cool surface of the pendant with my thumb, feeling both relief and shame. Relief that someone finally believed me. Shame that I needed protection from my own blood. Evelyn exhaled slowly, the tension leaving her shoulders. "Thank you, Captain. Truly." He nodded. "You did the right thing bringing this forward. Stay vigilant, but try to keep your routine normal. Panic spreads fast on a ship. We'll handle this quietly." As we stood to leave, the captain added, "Mrs. Layton, whoever this man is, he won't find you unguarded." Outside, the corridor felt brighter, though my heart still beat like a warning drum. I slipped the pendant's chain around my neck. It lay cool against my skin, glinting faintly under the light, an ornament to anyone watching, but a lifeline to those who knew. Evelyn squeezed my hand as we walked back toward the cabins. "You see," she said softly, "we're not alone anymore." I nodded, though the thought that lingered was darker safety on a ship was an illusion, thin as the walls between us and the sea, still for the first time since leaving Charleston. I felt the smallest thread of protection, a fragile promise floating somewhere between trust and fear. The captain's gala began like a dream carefully rehearsed. The ballroom glowed beneath chandeliers strung with crystals that caught every flicker of light. A quartet played near the stage, their violins weaving through the hum of conversation and clinking glasses. The air smelled faintly of champagne and roses. I wore an emerald green gown borrowed from the ship's boutique, chosen by Evelyn, who said the color made me look alive again. She stood beside me in silver elegant and composed her posture as regal as the evening demanded. Around us, passengers laughed easily, oblivious to the invisible tension threaded through my every breath. Captain Hayes moved among the guests greeting tables, shaking hands, smiling for photographs. To anyone watching it was a celebration of luxury and calm, an ocean away from danger. But beneath the music, I could feel the pulse of the ship, that low rhythmic vibration that reminded me of how small we all were on open water. Evelyn lifted her glass toward mine. "You look like someone ready to start over," she said softly. Or someone pretending to. She smiled knowingly. Pretending is an art, Marjorie. Tonight you master it. I returned her smile, though my heart hadn't loosened since the captain's meeting. The pendant at my neck rested cold against my skin, hidden by the neckline of my dress. Each time the light hit it, it flashed faintly, like a warning I carried disguised as beauty. Halfway through dinner, I saw him. The man in the green shirt, now transformed in a dark tuxedo hair, slicked back posture, easy. He stood near the bar glass of champagne untouched in his hand. Our eyes met through the crowd, and though his lips curved faintly, the look behind it was colder than before. Evelyn followed my gaze. "He's here," she murmured. Captain Hayes said security was watching. I said more to steady myself than to reassure her. "Watching doesn't mean stopping," she whispered. We went through the motions of civility, polite laughter, slow dancing, endless toasts. But beneath it, time stretched thin. Every movement of the stranger's reflection in the ballroom glass caught my attention. He never approached, never spoke, just watched, as though waiting for a cue that hadn't yet come. When the captain gave his closing toast, I clapped along with the rest, the smile frozen on my face. My phone, tucked inside my clutch, vibrated once. I excused myself from the table, stepping into the corridor near the elevators. The hallway was quieter, lit in soft gold. The message glowed on the screen. "Claire, don't stay up too late, Mom. Get some rest after midnight." The words seemed ordinary at first, affectionate even. But the moment I read them, a chill swept through me. After midnight, that was when the man at the bar had said it would work. The timing was no coincidence. I turned the phone over in my hand, forcing slow, measured breaths. Evelyn appeared a moment later, reading my expression before I said a word. She texted, "Didn't she?" "Yes." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "Then it's tonight." I slipped the phone back into my clutch, my fingers steady despite the tremor in my chest. Then we stay visible. We smile. We let him think I'll be where he expects me. She nodded. "And when he comes for you, we'll have proof he wasn't just watching." Back inside the ballroom, the music shifted into a waltz. Couples spun gracefully beneath the chandeliers, their movements slow and seamless. The man in the tuxedo moved closer to the dance floor now, his reflection passing behind mine in the glass wall. It was like watching a storm form in silence. No sound, no threat, just inevitability. I smiled at a passing couple, pretending to admire the decor. And in the mirror's reflection, I caught my own face composed, elegant, unreadable. For the first time, I realized I no longer looked like the woman Claire thought she could destroy. Evelyn touched my arm lightly. Midnight, soon. I know, I whispered. The violins rose, filling the air with their trembling sweetness. I straightened my shoulders, my reflection glinting against the glass, like a ghost made of calm resolve. If the man wanted a performance, he would have one. And this time, the prey wasn't running. The ship had fallen quiet after the gala, its laughter and music fading into the hum of the sea. I left the ballroom before midnight, pretending exhaustion, my emerald gown catching the faint light of the corridor. Evelyn stayed behind just long enough to make sure he saw her wave me off. Every step toward my cabin felt measured, rehearsed. Captain Hayes had arranged it all that afternoon, security posted in plain clothes, nearby cameras hidden in the ceiling vent, and an unmarked control room 2 decks below. When I reached my door, I fumbled with the key just long enough for anyone watching to think I was tired. Inside, I left the lights dim and the balcony curtains open. My suitcase sat near the bed, half unzipped, as if I had been packing to leave early. I lingered a moment, staring at the reflection in the sliding glass door, the faint outline of myself, the curve of the ocean behind me. It was strange to think this cabin, once a trap, was now a stage. Then I slipped out quietly and walked 2 corridors down where Officer Patel was waiting. His voice was low but steady. "We'll monitor from below. The captain's ready." The control room was narrow, lined with screens that glowed in shades of blue and gray. I stood beside Captain Hayes and Evelyn, my heart hammering in my chest as the feed flickered from one camera to another. There it was. My cabin still and empty. The ocean a dark shimmer beyond the glass. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door handle moved. The man entered silently, dressed in black gloves, tight on his hands. His face looked different without the smile he wore at the bar, hollow, cold. He scanned the room with a flashlight beam, moving deliberately toward the balcony. "He's done this before," Evelyn whispered. On the screen, he knelt near the railing, checking the bolts, testing how far it would open. Then he pulled out his phone. The captain nodded to the technician beside him, who began recording the screen in high resolution. The man typed quickly. The words appeared as his phone's camera caught the reflection in the glass door balcony. No struggle. Make it look accidental. My breath caught in my throat. The technician zoomed in, enhancing the next line as it appeared. The sender's name was clear. Claire. For a moment, everything inside me went still. I could hear only the faint hum of the ship, the quiet exhale of the ocean beyond steel walls. The man pocketed the phone and looked toward the open balcony, his body tensing as if imagining the act itself, the shove, the fall, the splash that would vanish into darkness before anyone heard. "Now," Captain Hayes said calmly. 2 security officers burst into the room on screen. The man turned, startled, but it was too late. They pinned him against the wall, the phone clattering to the floor. One officer twisted his arms behind his back as the other retrieved the device. I pressed a hand to my mouth, not from fear, but disbelief at the precision of it, the cruel neatness. Watching it unfold felt like watching a nightmare from outside my own body. "Good work," Hayes murmured into his radio. "Get him to the brig." When the feed switched back to my empty cabin, I could still see the balcony door swaying slightly from the wind. For a long time, no one spoke. Finally, Evelyn touched my shoulder. "You've got your proof," she said softly. Proof. The word sounded heavy, final. Proof that my daughter had written my death in a text message. Proof that the girl I had raised with bedtime stories and birthday cakes had decided that my life was worth less than her convenience. I turned away from the screens, my legs unsteady, but my voice clear. Captain, whatever comes next, I want every message, every file copied. I need to see it all. He nodded, his expression grave. You'll have everything, Mrs. Layton. I walked toward the small window of the control room. Outside, the sea was black and endless, swallowing the moonlight. Somewhere out there, my daughter was sleeping soundly, believing her plan had already played out. But in that cold, humming silence, I knew something had shifted. The horror was real, but so was the power that came with finally knowing the truth. The morning after the arrest, the ship felt heavier, as if the ocean itself had shifted beneath us. The sky outside the captain's office was bruised with gray, the waves restless under the early light. I sat across from Captain Hayes, his desk neat, except for the small black phone placed between us. Evelyn stood by the window, her arms folded. Her reflection wavered against the glass, silent and steady. On the desk beside me lay the man's phone, its cracked screen frozen on the last text message he'd received. Balcony. No struggle. Make it look accidental. Captain Hayes cleared his throat softly. We've traced the messages. The number matches your daughter's contact information. Are you certain you want to make the call yourself? I need to, I said. She has to hear my voice before anyone else's. He nodded, once then pressed a few buttons and slid the phone toward me. The dial tone filled the quiet room. Each ring felt like the slow beat of something breaking open inside my chest. Claire answered on the fourth ring. Mom. Oh, thank God, are you all right? Her voice came quick, high, breathless. It was the voice she used when pretending concern. I'm fine, I said evenly. Your man failed. Silence. Then the smallest sound of a breath caught mid-throat. What are you talking about? The one you hired? I continued. The man in the green shirt. He's in custody now. The captain has your messages. Another silence. I could almost hear the walls of her world cracking. Then she spoke again, her tone shifting fast. Denial, disbelief, calculation. Mom, that's insane. Why would you even say something like that? Are you feeling confused? Maybe someone's. I cut her off gently. Don't, Claire. Please. You don't have to lie anymore. For a moment, nothing. Then a sound, soft at first, like a broken sob. You were supposed to fall asleep and not wake up, she whispered. You were supposed to make it easy. My breath left me not from shock, but from sorrow. She had said it without hesitation, without shame. I did everything for you. She went on, her voice rising. I paid your bills, managed your stupid house. Do you know what it's like to drown in debt while you just sit there with everything in your name? Her words came faster, unraveling. You ruined everything. You stop. My voice came out calm, steady, like the surface of still water. No, sweetheart. You did. There was a long, hollow pause. Then the line went dead. I set the phone down carefully, my fingers trembling. Evelyn turned from the window, her face pale but composed. It's done, she said softly. Captain Hayes exhaled through his nose. We'll turn her name over to the authorities as soon as we dock. I nodded, unable to speak. The air in the room felt thin, carrying the scent of salt and iron. Outside, a faint light broke through the clouds, scattering silver over the sea. For the first time in days, the waves no longer frightened me. They moved endlessly, neither forgiving nor cruel, just truthful in their way. I watched them shimmer against the horizon, the ship cutting cleanly through the water, leaving behind a wake that erased itself as it went. By the time the Ocean Serenity docked at Cozumel, the air had turned sharp with tension. The passengers smiled and waved from the decks, unaware of what waited below. Federal agents in dark uniforms stood at the pier, their badges glinting in the sun. Captain Hayes met them first, exchanging brief words before leading them aboard. Within minutes, the man who had tried to kill me was escorted off the ship in handcuffs. Head bowed, his calm finally shattered. I watched from the upper deck beside Evelyn, the salt wind catching the edge of my scarf. In the captain's office, the agents reviewed the phone and documents. The confessions came quickly. The man admitted to everything: the plan, the timing, the promise of payment. The money trail was clean, too clean, leading straight to Claire's bank account. Transfers marked consulting fees scheduled days before I ever stepped aboard. I listened in silence, my hands folded tightly in my lap. Every new detail landed like a small, deliberate wound. When the door opened again, Frank Odell stepped in, sunburned from travel, and holding a weathered briefcase. He looked at me the way only old friends can, without judgment, but with deep, quiet sorrow. "I've got the papers," he said, laying them gently on the desk. "Claire forged your signature on 3 home equity loans, totaling $280,000. It's all here. The bank confirmed it." I nodded, too tired to react. The evidence stacked neatly between us, proof of betrayal, line by line, dollar by dollar. Outside, the ocean sparkled as if nothing had happened. Inside, I felt the weight of justice finally arriving, heavy, cold, and lonelier than I had ever imagined. The courthouse in Charleston smelled faintly of wood polish and rain. Months had passed since the cruise, but the memory of that night, the sea, the wind, the shimmer of betrayal, had never left me. I sat in the front row, my hands clasped around a folded handkerchief that once belonged to my late husband. The courtroom buzzed softly, voices hushed by the weight of what was about to happen. Claire entered, flanked by 2 marshals. Her hair was lighter than before, almost colorless, and her once confident stride had turned uncertain. She looked smaller, diminished, her eyes scanning the room until they found mine. For a heartbeat, I saw the little girl she once was, the child who used to braid my hair and fall asleep in my lap. Then she looked away. Her defense attorney spoke for nearly an hour, weaving a story of desperation and emotional collapse. He spoke of financial stress, of postpartum depression from years ago, of a daughter driven to poor judgment by pressure and exhaustion. Claire sat motionless, occasionally dabbing her eyes with a tissue, the perfect portrait of remorse. When the prosecutor rose, his tone was colder. He described methodical deceit, insurance fraud, forged signatures, the hiring of a hitman. He played the recordings of her voice, her words, cutting through the courtroom air with chilling clarity. "Balcony. No struggle. Make it look accidental." Several people gasped. I simply stared ahead. Finally, the judge turned toward me. "Mrs. Layton," he said gently, "do you wish to make a statement before sentencing?" I stood slowly. My knees trembled, but my voice did not. "Your Honor," I said, "people keep asking if I forgive her. I've thought about it every day since the cruise, and I've come to understand something." I looked at Claire, who was crying now, her shoulders shaking. Forgiveness is for the innocent. My daughter stopped being that the moment she decided my life was worth less than her convenience. The judge nodded, expression unreadable. "Thank you, Mrs. Layton." When he read the verdict, the room fell into a silence so deep it seemed to press against the walls. Claire, 18 years for attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy. Her husband, 7 years for aiding and falsifying documents. Claire didn't look at me as they led her away. Only when she passed my brow did her lips part as if she wanted to speak, but no sound came. Evelyn's hand rested lightly on my arm, steady and warm. "It's over," she whispered. I wasn't sure it ever would be. Outside, the rain had stopped and the air smelled clean again. People hurried across the courthouse steps, umbrellas dripping, unaware of the life that had just unraveled behind those doors. Justice had come, but it brought no comfort, only a strange, quiet dignity, the kind that comes from surviving what should have broken you. I walked down the courthouse steps, without looking back each step, echoing like a final goodbye. Spring arrived softly in Charleston, carrying the scent of salt and magnolia. I sold the old house, the one with its heavy curtains and heavier memories, and moved into a small apartment overlooking the harbor. From my window, I could see the tides shifting each morning, calm and certain, as if reminding me that time knows how to cleanse what it carries. The space was modest, but filled with light. I kept little of the past, a few framed photos, my husband's pocket watch, and one seashell I'd taken from the deck of the Ocean Serenity. It sat on my windowsill, now pale and smooth, a reminder that the sea had once nearly claimed me, and then somehow given me back. Twice a week, I volunteered at a senior center downtown. Most of the women came in timid, at first embarrassed, to talk about the money they'd lost to scammers or family members who had taken advantage. I told them my story in pieces, never the sensational parts, just enough to let them know that knowledge is a form of armor. We talked about Will's signatures and bank alerts. We talked about trust and when not to give it. Evelyn visited often, always bringing fresh coffee and the latest gossip from her bridge group. We sat on the balcony, watching the ships drift in and out, our laughter carried by the wind. She'd tease me about teaching financial defense, and I'd tease her about becoming my unofficial bodyguard. Some evenings, I'd walk along the pier alone, the harbor lights shimmering like scattered coins on the water. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the dark. Survival, I'd come to understand, wasn't about revenge. It was about learning to live wisely and choosing peace over fear. A year later, Charleston woke beneath a sky washed in gold. The harbor shimmered like liquid glass gulls gliding low over the tide. I walked the pier with slow, steady steps, my breath visible in the soft chill of dawn. Around my neck hung the small silver pendant, the same one Captain Hayes had given me on the Ocean Serenity. Once a panic button, now just a necklace. I touched it gently as I walked. It no longer felt like a reminder of fear, but of survival, of the strength that had carried me through the storm my own child had created. The city behind me stirred awake fishermen, calling out to one another, the scent of coffee drifting from the cafe near the docks. Every morning, I came here to watch the tide rise and fall. It had become a ritual, a quiet prayer to the sea that had tried to take me, and instead returned me whole. The sea didn't take me, I whispered into the breeze. It gave me back to myself. The waves moved in slow rhythm, turning gold as the sun climbed higher. I thought of Evelyn, still lively and unshakable, sending postcards from her travels. I thought of the women at the senior center now, stronger, wiser, less afraid. And I thought of Claire, not with anger, not even sorrow, but with the acceptance that some storms pass only when you stop fighting their noise. The water brushed against the pier below, steady and endless. For the first time, I understood that peace was not something given. It was something rebuilt tide by tide, choice by choice. As the sun rose higher, I smiled quietly. The sea glittered ahead, and for once it felt like home.